Nevada.
Live from KPAH Radio in Pahrump, Nevada, it's the Cosmic Connection with your host, Cosmo.
And that is I. Welcome to the Cosmic Connection, my UFO talk show, broadcasting from the secret studios out here in Pahrump, Nevada. Hey, we're right next door to Area 51. We knock, but nobody's answering today. Cosmic Connection, July 10th, 2005. Welcome to the show. We'd like to thank of all our people who have contacted the Cosmic Connection. To all the countries around the world, we welcome you. 7 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Again, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to continue our interview with Art Campbell. And he has the e-book, did a UFO crash at San Augustin, New Mexico in 1947, and we're going to go right to him on the phone. Art, are you there, sir?
Yes, I am, Cosmo.
Great. And you can hear me, is that correct?
I hear you a lot better than last week.
Outstanding. Well, I'll just throw my voice into this microphone and we'll make a connection somehow. We're speaking with Art Campbell. Art Campbell. Ladies and gentlemen, the reason I'm having this part two is we're going to go into the individuals that Art Campbell has crossed in the early 50s. Ladies and gentlemen, Art Campbell has touched and crossed paths with George Van Tassel, Truman Bethrom, somebody there in my expertise in ufology, that's a name that's new to me, Daniel Fry, of course, a Mr. Buck Nelson from the Ozarks. We'll get into who that gentleman was. And for those of you novices out there who have looked into the early contactees of the 50s, I'd like to ask Art about Giant Rock and the Integratron. As I understand, he was out there and rubbed elbows with some of the influential people around there. Also, we're going to be speaking to Art Campbell, the author, about Edward Ruppelt. He wrote the book and was head of Project Blue Book starting in March 1952 after Project Grudge. Is that correct?
That's right, yes.
Also, a name that jumps out at me is Frank Edwards. For some reason, I'm not too clear why that name jumps out at me. We'll cover that again. And Art, another thing I want to talk about, let's go into it right now. I mentioned, was it possible that Barney Barnett came across or had the unfortunate opportunity when he was at the crash site at the plains of San Augustin, the 4602nd Air Intelligence Squadron. I'm looking at a chapter here in The Truth About the UFO Crash at Roswell, penned by Kevin Randall and Donald R. Schmidt on page 95, where on January 3rd, 1953, the 4602nd Air Intelligence Squadron was created by Air Defense Command Regulation 24-4 in what might be considered an amazing coincidence. The Robinson panel convened about 2 weeks later. They reviewed the information, suggested answers for the previously listed unidentifieds, and recommended that the myth be taken from the UFO sighting reports.
Okay. Well, I don't have a copy of that Robinson panel thing with me, but I have no way of knowing what unit
Sure.
Barnett ran onto. They were kind of intimidating when he talked to them, and I think he went in and told his boss that same day that he'd seen the saucer in the military. Kind of gave him a hard time. So I don't know what unit they were with. I haven't any idea what unit they were with. My guess is they were up out of the White Sands area because and they would have had to been on the road about 6 hours in those days. A lot of those roads that are paved now were gravel in those days. So those guys must have been up in the wee hours of the morning to get there by mid-morning, which when Barnett said he saw this crashed UFO.
And to reiterate for our listeners, the San Augustin crash occurred on July 3rd or thereabouts, a day before the July 4th Roswell incident.
Well, we're a little late on that one. Now that is some theory. My theory is that it went down on the night of July 1/2, because the archaeologists had moved in there that night and set up camp, and Barney Barnett, his only time on the plains that week was July 2nd. And this one might have been found before Max Brazel came into Roswell with the wreckage from that one off the Foster Ranch.
I completely understand that reasoning and logic, and your research has been very, very well documented by you, and the way you've gone about it. Let's where would you like to start, Art?
Oh goodness. Well, let's start back at the beginning. I think your George Van Tassel and Integratron thing is a good place to start. The George Van Tassel was managed an airport out in the Mojave Desert north of Palmdale, and he had some quasi-religious gatherings there, meaning all kinds of people. And it's just a nice name for all kinds of kooks, really. And they started meeting out there in 1954, and Giant Rock was a big round boulder that had come out of the mountains thousands of years ago, about 30 yards across, and the airport was on an old dry lake bed next to it. And under the rock, they had some old prospector or somebody had hollowed out a lot of space, and there was living quarters in there, and I recall a little bit of a library and a little snack bar down there. It gets pretty hot out there, so we weren't all underneath. There's no room under there for more than a bedroom or two. But Van Tassel claims he was in contact with extraterrestrials, and they belonged to what they call a council of 7 lights, and on a spaceship that was circling Earth. And he began to get some backers and some help in about 1954. I think he started his conferences out there in 1954. I mentioned earlier, there were 5,000 people there at the first one. Now, I got there in 58. We didn't have 5,000. A couple hundred had been more like it.
Well, let's, pardon me, let's back up here. 5,000 at the very first one? How do you think the word got out?
Well, all of those were living here within 2 hours of Los Angeles. And they had a big gathering about 1952 or 3 at the Hollywood Hotel, where George Adamski and a lot of other people attended. And I think the word just got out by word of mouth, and there may have been some media, might have been a newsletter or two, but I have a feeling that he was kind of picked up from that Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel thing that they did in about 53.
Well, as you state in your ebook, UFO Crash at San Augustin, that's the ebook, ladies and gentlemen, that was written by my guest, Art Campbell. He states that George Adamski was the rock star of ufology in the day.
He was the first one, yes, that really got any publicity.
Well, he did world tours.
Yeah, he did several world tours.
And you state in your ebook that he went and visited somebody in the Dutch prince of somewhere.
Yeah, Queen Juliana.
Okay.
I think it was 1958, 59.
Right, and then when the bloody English got wind of it, they started raining on Adamski's parade, and Queen Elizabeth had scheduled audience, and it was turned down.
Well, you never see those palace schedules, but I suspect that once the Air Force people got to her, if he had been scheduled, I suspect they could easily talk her out of it in those days. Maybe not today, but in those days, they would want to maintain their image at all costs.
Would that have been the MOD that we've heard so much about? Were they in existence at that time? Sir, I have to ask you. I'm in the younger category here. I don't know.
I don't know what intelligence outfit it would be. It just could be someone in the Royal Air Force said this isn't a good idea. And I don't think they were trying to hide anything in those days. There was such a kooky element that was around UFOs that I think they wanted to protect their royalty from that. I don't think they were trying to suppress anything.
Understandable. So you actually talked to George Adamski himself?
Yes, I did. I met him up there on Mount Palomar. He had a home there on the slopes of Mount Palomar, and he used to work down at a restaurant. And we went up there one morning and knocked on the door, and his Secretary Lucy McGinnis answered, and she said, "Well, the professor is resting." And that's the first time I'd ever heard him called professor.
Yes.
We had a photograph from one of the other contactees, Buck Nelson, that we'll talk about a little bit later.
Okay, sure, we can tie into that.
And I thought he might want to see this. Well, in those days, any photograph, most of those contactees would want to see because they just didn't want to miss out on anything. And so she said, well, I think let me go show it to him and see if he's available. And he came to the porch, and we talked for, 5 or 10 minutes, and he they were building a porch onto their cottage up there. So we were looking kind of through stud walls, and it was an interesting guy, but I didn't really spend much time with him, and we certainly didn't get any information from him. And I wasn't impressed or wasn't unimpressed. I just thought this was an interesting guy.
That's what you stated. That's what I got from you, was that you thought they were very unassuming people.
Yeah, I thought they were. Of course, they said audacious things.
Sure.
But the people, if you meet them in a social situation, are quite normal people, and they talk and they have feelings and they play games and they do everything anybody else does.
Well, this location that you first met Adamski at, this is where those famous photographs were taken.
Yes, at least near there. I had some opinion about his photographs I'd like to pass on.
Please do. A lot of people have, is once they start knowing about which photographs that we're talking about. Continue, sir.
There are the ones in his first book, Flying Saucers Have Landed, and I believe he co-authored that with Desmond Leslie. But in any case, they were exceptionally sharp photographs, and I don't think that was possible for him to take those through the telescope that I saw sitting on his porch, that refractor telescope that somebody had given him, some backer had given him. But they were very, very good photographs. And the interesting thing about Adamski's photographs, people are still seeing UFOs like that today. And either they're imagining it from Adamski's photographs or his photographs with a real thing.
Sure.
And but I felt the photographs were the strongest part of his claim of being contacted by extraterrestrials.
Something that I don't like to do is editorialize when I'm doing an interview, but I think it's important that I bring it up, and forgive me. I've always had my opinion, and what I've seen is that UFOs in their pictures and the way they've been depicted, like in 1950s, they look like a craft that you would think would be updated, technologically advanced for 1950. Then you go into the 60s, and the 70s, and the 80s, and the 90s, and now in 2000, the new millennium, we've got these flying triangles. I saw the flying triangle in Fallon, Nevada in September about 3 years ago. We have some famous people here in Pahrump, Nevada, who've stated they've seen the flying triangle. Lots of people have seen the flying triangle. The flying triangle has been spotted over Palmdale, California. Michael Lindemann, who was on my show in 1994, stated that they used to go out into Palmdale and look for this flying triangle and see it. What I'm trying to, I'll get back to my original thought here, is that George Adamski filmed the craft of the time, and that people actually saw that craft years later and were seeing it, but not a day before.
Yes, that's my thought also, Cosmo. That he either set the stage for imagining craft and everybody followed him, or we've been seeing the same thing over the years. But they have changed somewhat. His had 3 balls underneath that were some kind of connected to the propulsion system.
Yes.
And we don't see that anymore. All the saucers we're seeing today are smooth on the bottom.
Well, lo and
so
behold,
it might be technological change.
Well, lo and behold, those 3 balls did show up in descriptions from Bob Lazar.
Yes, that would have meant they probably had one earlier, and then some of them were later. Bob Lazar said he saw 9 in that hangar there at Area 51.
I recall.
And I don't know what the age of them was, but I don't recall the 3 balls underneath. But he went inside and said there were 3 different propulsion systems. One propelled it forward, one propelled it up, and I believe one was working on it going down. So each one of those 3 balls had some kind of a connection with the tower. They weren't just landing gear.
Right, the antimatter drive or whatever he called them.
Yes,
I used
yes.
to know them by heart and everything, but I've gone elsewhere in my research. But yes, yeah, you are correct. Okay, so let's continue with George Adamski. You're meeting him at the house. You've presented him with this photograph.
Yes, and he was interested in it, but he didn't ask for a copy or anything. And it was kind of the basis for our chat. We used the photograph to get to see him.
Absolutely.
And so I was at the time with the Kansas City UFO Study Club. We had started that about 1957, I believe. And he came to lecture in 1959. And by that time, I'd sort of moved on from that group to a NICAP group, which was
Based
out of Washington, D.C., and we were doing really straight investigations. There's nothing about aliens and no UFO landings and people and footprints or whatever.
Right.
They were just investigating things in the sky. We didn't see a lot in the Kansas City area in those days, frankly. I went out 4 or 5 times, maybe six times, and turned my reports in, but nothing that you want to put in print.
But then you did go to Washington, D.C.
Right. Well, we went there in 1959.
Okay, and this is
And,
7. Well, let me interrupt you. This is 7 years after the July 1952 Washington Nationals incident.
That's right. Yes. Went there right after we formed NICAP, and I had talked to President Truman in his library in Independence. One day I was standing in there looking at a piece of sculpture, and this was 7 years after he had left the presidency. And in he walks with his driver. And we've had a family contact, and it's covered in the book. One of those chapters in there I talk about the Truman family having married into my own family, and it's very distant shirt-tail relative stuff, but he was playing the piano at one of the weddings in our family in 1905, so he had some interest in what was going on. But anyhow, I did bring up the fact that I talked to, I was with NICAP, and he looked kind of quizzical and said, well, they investigate flying saucers. And he said, well, Mr. Campbell, it's been very nice talking to you, and smiled and walked away. So that, my maybe 30 seconds was my time with Harry Truman, but it was sort of a memorable 30 seconds. And in any case, I had talked to Truman at that time, and then that summer my wife and I took a trip. And the readers, I keep saying readers, I hope you've got readers out there, the listeners, if they're listening, we went back there in a Volkswagen, slept in it, and made the whole trip on $100. You couldn't, make 100 miles now on $100.
Absolutely.
But we were back for almost 2 weeks, took in a lot of sights. We stopped to see Keyhole. Well, I mentioned him, I had talked to Truman, and he said, could you get a letter to Harry Truman? I said, no, I don't think so. I don't think he was that interested in UFOs, but he did ask about NICAP. And so I let it rest. I let it rest for 36 years. And I got a letter from the Truman Library saying that from Keyhole, Keyhole had sent to Truman after I talked to him, saying that Mr. Arthur Campbell of Kansas City, Missouri, that's me, had said he'd expressed an interest in UFOs. That wasn't quite what I told Keyhole, but I was sure interested in finding the letter 36 years after that it had been written, and my name was in there, Senator Lyndon Johnson, Edwin Hillencotter, and I was impressed, but a little bit belatedly. Anyhow, that was my contact with Truman, and then we visited Keyhole that summer, and he had later sent this letter.
Yes.
And but he had suggested to me that I called him saying that George Adamski was coming to Kansas City to do a lecture, and did I want him to? I'm sorry about the lecture. I didn't tell him about the lecture. George Adamski came to Kansas City, and told some people that he had gotten a ride from Kansas City to Davenport, where he was doing his next lecture on a UFO.
Right.
He was taken off a train.
Of which you have an entire chapter devoted to that story.
Right, and it's called George Adamski and the Rock Island 508.
Right.
I think your listeners would enjoy it. And so forth, I went out to, I got a hold of the keyhole again and said, would you like me to look into this? He said, by all means. He sent me a badge. Oh, it looked real official.
Right.
And so I got in to see the chief detective of the railroads, which is where he suggested I go, and he paved the way for me to talk to the train crew. And I have all their statements in the book. I think there's 5 of them in there: engineer, a fireman, and a chair car attendant, and 1 or 2 others. And the train hadn't even stopped, paused. He couldn't have gotten off. He couldn't open the vestibule, which was part of the problems in those days, getting on a train or getting off one. And apparently he had phonied up this claim before he went to England. So he could then tell them when he got over there, he'd been with flying saucers from Kansas City to Davenport, which was, about 500 miles, 400 miles maybe. And so I think we had a guy confront him at his hotel there. And I guess he tried to grab the papers and made a big fool of himself.
Well, let's tell everybody who we are and what's going on. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the live Cosmic Connection, July 10th, 2005. I'd like to welcome everyone who's joined us today near the Area 51, and we are July 10th, 2005. My guest today is Art Campbell. We had him on last week. If you missed him, that's too bad. We're covering some of the information that we covered last week. Also, he has a wealth of information on some of the old contactees of the early 50s. Mr. Campbell also was instrumental in helping get NICAP, the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomenon, started. Mr. Campbell has a email book, ladies and gentlemen, an e-book. It's brand new technology today. If you've never heard of such a thing, it's a electronic book. It is entitled UFO Crash at San Augustin. And that's San Augustin. Did a UFO crash on the plains of San Augustin in 1947. Over 100 color photographs and illustrations, maps. It's got a fantastic article in there about the Lonnie Zecora incident. Also, we've got, as we've touched on last week, ladies and gentlemen, we've got some artificial body organ that's in there that Art told us all about. Cosmic Connection website, and that's tvufo.tripod.com. There are no W's. It's http:// real simple, tvufo.tripod.com. And you'll see a link and a photograph of Art Campbell's book on the front of our webpage there. And we want you to check that out. Make sure you pick up a copy. And Art, let's go in and continue.
Okay. Where were we, Cosmo?
I think what we're going to do is we're going to, I tell you what, when we come back from the break, what I want to do is talk about Frank Edwards and your affiliation with Donald Kehoe, because Donald Kehoe was quite the individual before he got into the Blue Book thing. He served his time in the it wasn't the United States Air Force, it was the Army Air Force. Am I correct?
Well, actually, he was an Annapolis graduate, Cosmo, and it's a natural error if I could make, and he was actually a Marine Corps major when he retired.
Okay.
And he was an aide to Charles Lindbergh.
Oh, I see. Okay, well, we'll get into that when we come back from the break. You're listening to Cosmo. This is the Cosmic Connection. Hey, we're coming back.
You're listening to Talk Radio of Pahrump, listened to by more alien life forms than any other radio station. For all Cosmic Connection fans, the website to go to is http://tvufo.tripod.com. That's http://tvufo.tripod.com.
Smokey Bear would like to remind everyone that fireworks are not allowed on public lands in Nevada. Recent rains have created grasses in some areas that are 4 feet tall. Combined with the extremely dry conditions in southern Nevada, it would take only a spark to ignite a dangerous wildfire. Adults and youths may be prosecuted for using fireworks on public lands, resulting in a fine of not more than $10,000 and/or imprisonment of not more than 1 year. This message is brought to you by your public land agencies in southern Nevada.
If you have a public service announcement you'd like us to webcast, email it to us at kpah@pahrumpradio.com. We'll record it at no cost to you and play it throughout our 24-hour webcast day. That's KPAH at ParumPradio.com. All program content produced by KPAH is sole property of and copyright 2005 Talk Radio of Pahrump Incorporated. All opinions and statements heard on Talk Radio of Pahrump are those of the program hosts, guests, and callers alone. Listeners driving in downtown Pahrump hear us on 1700 on their AM radio. Maybe not.
Now in our 5th year of broadcasting on the internet, you're listening to KPAH, Pahrump, Nevada.
Hey, happy birthday, KPAH Radio and the Cosmic Connection. KPAH 5 years, Cosmic Connection. I think we're going on 12 years. How about that? Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you again. Cosmic Connection is live, broadcasting from the air-conditioned studios in Pahrump, Nevada, July 10th, 2005, on the side door of Area 51. Also, ladies and gentlemen, I got some information I want to tell you about. Check out the Crop Circle Connector. I want you to go to the Cosmic Connection website at tvufo.tripod.com. You'll see a link there to the Crop Circle Connector. You got to check out these brand new pictogram formations that have just dropped in the last 4 or 5 days. Crop Circle season 2005 is well underway. We're in the early part of July. The season started around what was that? June, May, June, something like that. And April, that's right. Thank you. April. They started out in April, and she remembered that for me, and I thank her for that. That's my girl Friday, who's sitting here on my left. Ladies and gentlemen, just go out to the Cosmic Connection, tvufo.tripod.com. Click on the Crop Circle Connector for 2005, and just delight in the fantastic pictograms that have landed. I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. Also, you may want to check out the Jeff Rentz site for a new phenomenon has raised its head again. We've got something called flying humanoids. Now, I wouldn't bring this up if I didn't see the video. It's from Mexico, and we have one video from, of all places, Santa Monica, California. They look very similar. You will, if you haven't heard my opinions on ufology in the past, stay tuned every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. I want you to become members of the Cosmic Connection and stay tuned and listen to what I have to tell you, why I think I'm pretty well versed in the art of ufology. And speaking of art, we've got Art Campbell on. Art, are you with me, my friend?
Yes, I am.
Okay. We're talking with Mr. Art Campbell today. He is the author of the book entitled UFO Crash at San Augustin. Did a UFO crash on the plains of San Augustin in 1947? And we're going to go right back into what we were talking about, Donald Kehoe.
Okay, well, I think we were talking about the investigation that Kehoe had sent me on of George Adamski, and George Adamski went to London and I think he was setting up a fib to tell him that he'd been taken on another UFO journey.
Okay, we need you to talk right into that microphone. We're getting some feedback, some strange, funny noises.
That better?
There you go. How's that?
Okay. So anyhow,
there you go.
They
I get a thumbs up from the other room there.
See somebody in the royal court, but they'd canceled that, and he was confronted by a nightcap man that happened to be in England, and made a kind of a fool of himself. But I didn't hear very much about him after that. I think he held on to the mid-60s or so, and then kind of faded out of the UFO scene.
Okay. What about Frank Edwards? Why does that name sound familiar to me?
Well, Frank Edwards started the whole extraterrestrial thing. He wrote a book in 1950 called Behind the Flying Saucers.
Oh.
And it was my first book, my first introduction to it. And he did I'm sorry, Frank Edwards had an early radio show on flying saucers. And it was Frank Scully that had written the book. Memory's a little hazy. It's a moment here.
Sure.
And so he had a radio program, and he was one of the first radio commentators to put a UFO segment on his, I believe it was a nightly broadcast. And I used to listen to it when I was stationed at North Island there in San Diego. And that's one of the how I got interested in UFOs was through Frank Edwards' broadcast.
Well, the UFO store, which supplies the Cosmic Connection with its research material, supplied me with some 1950s radio broadcasts, one of them being Long John Neville out of New York.
Yes, I remember some of those names, but, you know, I was just an enlisted man in the Navy and later was a college student, and I didn't get to know or associate with those people pretty much after 1960 when I went into teaching.
Well, I got to tell you, I had no idea such things happened. I thought Billy Goodman, of where I got my start from, was the pioneer of this broadcasting of ufology, and I was wrong. There's a whole list of people who were doing it a lot longer than before 1989, that's for sure.
The first show I was on was a guy called Vogel, and he was out of Kansas City. He talked about all kinds of paranormal things, and I think it was a 10 o'clock show till about midnight.
No kidding. What year was that?
Oh, 57, 58.
What were the call letters? Do you recall the call letters?
No, I don't.
Okay, that's fine.
But,
Out of Kansas
it's
City,
a nice
though.
show.
Yeah, sure. Sure, absolutely. Okay, let's go to, again, ladies and gentlemen, I want to reiterate, we're talking with Mr. Art Campbell. He is the author of UFO Crash at San Augustin, did a UFO crash on the plains of San Augustin in 1947. This is a fantastic ebook that we're making available to our listeners out there around the world, and we'd like to thank you for tuning in this July 10th, 2005. You can go to the UFOstore.com, or you can go to the Cosmic Connection website at tvufo.tripod.com. Let me ask you a question, Art. Did you ever hear, or you were back east during the time, I'm going to throw a name at you, Al Chop.
Al Chop was an Air Force man. I believe he was one of the early UFO investigators, but it seems to me like he was an Air Force lieutenant or major or something.
The reason I asked that name is I've got a black and white movie, UFOs invading something, I can't remember, I watch it every now and then, and it deals with the Washington Nationals incident from beginning to end. There is no science fiction involved with it. It centers around Al Chop, who was a real individual, and if memory serves me, I believe Al Chop is playing himself in the movie.
There was a movie came out regarding that called UFO, and it started out in 1951 or so, 52 probably, and I didn't get to see it till about 56 when it was about fifth run.
Right.
And I believe he was in there playing himself. I think you're right.
Right. Well, what's fantastic about this movie is at the end they show the Delbert Newhouse video.
Yeah, but there's another one too they show in there, which is even more dramatic.
Yes.
You remember those two UFOs that disappeared behind the water tower?
I sure do. And the reason why I didn't bring it up is because I get Delbert Newhouse mixed up with that. It's the Treadmonton film.
Right, and he was a baseball manager that came out of his office somewhere in Montana.
Yes.
And his office was, of course, up high in the baseball stadium. And came out of his office and happened to have a 16 or 8 millimeter camera.
Sure.
I believe it was 16.
And color.
In color. And these two things were coming across the horizon, and he got them as they came behind
the giant water tower.
And that was the first aerial UFOs I'd seen.
Sure.
Of course, the Air Force later said they were seagulls.
Yep.
And what seagulls are doing in Montana, I let the Air Force answer that one.
Absolutely. I'm sure they do have an answer. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest is Art Campbell. You're listening to the Cosmic Connection from the air-conditioned studios of KPAH Radio. This is July 10th. I'd like to welcome all the countries and all the individuals that are listening to us on the internet around the world. We're at cosmic@perumpradio.com. Again, Art Campbell is my guest. This is part 2 of a two-parter that we have. If you're interested in receiving copies of this, send Perump Radio an email. We'll take care of that for you. We're going down the list of the luminary people that Mr. Art Campbell has touched elbows with over the many years. Art, I got to ask you, for our audience, just how young are you, sir?
Well, I was 73 about a week ago.
So happy birthday to you. You're 74 years old. And ladies and gentlemen, the reason I find this gentleman so interesting is he did investigative work looking into this the UFO crash at San Augustin, as his ebook, electronic ebook states. But he went out and he did 7 years of research, ladies and gentlemen, of what we covered on the last show. We have an artificial body artifact that he's had several scientists, something way beyond me, people look at. He's found materials of aluminum type structure that he's had many people look over, had it analyzed. We've had material, wafers, the shoe art. Come on, let's go into the shoe. We didn't cover a whole lot of the shoe.
Well, let me tell you a little bit first about this. May have been associated with the Roswell crash. And we don't know that the craft came down at Roswell on its own. There was a theory that it might have hit another craft, and one went down at Roswell and one went down over on the plains of San Augustine. It apparently was the same night. It was a huge lightning storm.
You know, since you brought it up, I like to reiterate and tell everybody. You know, when Mac Brazel walked out on his sheep ranch, it was the Proctor Ranch. It wasn't his. He was a caretaker for it. And when he walked out on that it was July 5th that he walked out when the storm was over, and this quarter of a mile by half-mile debris field, ladies and gentlemen, this was debris that fell from the sky. There was no craft there. The craft continued on its collision course with an Arroyo some 60 miles away towards Corona. Am I correct, sir?
Yes, I believe so, yes.
Okay. Now, what we're saying, or what you're saying, or what you'd like to speculate, is either this is part of the Roswell crash, this is an entire crash altogether different, meaning the UFO crash at San Augustine, or two craft hit each other, one spewed parts over the Proctor Ranch and then crashed 60 miles away, from the Roswell debris field where Mac Brazel found those parts in the memory metal and the foil and the I-beams, of which Jesse Marcel and Jesse Marcel Jr. state that they saw on that kitchen table that night. And what the plains of San Augustine were is that could be where it all started. It could be.
Well, it was found sooner. So Barney Barnett was a civil engineer, was driving about 60 miles away from home. He left according to his wife's diary about 8 o'clock that morning, and was driving on the plains and saw something glinting. And this is a guy who's into agriculture and is a surveyor, among many of his duties. And so he saw his crashed item, saucer, in the morning of July 2nd.
Well, I sure did err there. You're absolutely right. We've got two different craft crashes. Let's put that.
I'm sure we do.
Well,
now we don't know whether they hit in the air or not. But
yeah, well, it doesn't take 2 days later.
The same anomaly that brought them both down.
Well, I suggested that somehow somebody could absolutely state that Cosmos suggested that something hung out in the sky for 2 days and then crashed at the Proctor Ranch or leave debris at the Proctor Ranch. That is not. We have two separate incidents here. You went and looked into the plains of San Augustine. You checked that out in what, 1993, 94?
Started in 94, Cosmo, and went back in 95 and found that thing that looks like an artificial body part.
Yes.
And we have that, I guess, 5 or 6 color photos, close-up of that in the book.
The photos and the maps and the drawings in the e-book are fantastic. Let's go to the shoe again. Anything on the shoes?
Well,
one shoe or two shoe?
I have one. Well,
one
shoe. I
shoe.
have 2 soles.
2 soles.
2 shoe soles.
All right.
And one is much smaller than the other one. Let's dwell on that one. I have more data on that.
Let's go.
It had about 9 layers, 9 or 10 layers, and a lot of them were cotton. And I thought, well, it's certainly
terrestrial.
5 or 6 layers of cotton was not something unusual.
Right.
But I can't say that it was any it was mixed with unknown material. And so I had it analyzed at the same kind of place, the same place that did the Shroud of Turin analysis, McCrone Labs out of Chicago. And I'm looking here at a drawing that's in the book, and here are the layers as they start up from the bottom. Rubber sole was made of plant pitch and an oil such as lecithin, It contains clay, calcium carbonate, filler pigmented with titanium white. That's the first layer. The second layer is compressed cotton fibers embedded in the vulcanized into the bottom of the sole I just read. And then we have a woven cotton cloth on top of that. We're working up to the bottom of the shoe.
Yes, and I'm looking at them at the color photos right now, ladies and gentlemen. You can get this from the UFOstore.com. You're going to want to order the book, The UFO Crash at the Plains of San Augustin.
As far as we know, this is the first shoe sole, any kind of adornment that's been found at all. And we don't say it's alien, but we can't find any sizes that are similar. Let me continue on up the shoe, up to the insole.
Sorry to bother you.
Okay,
Absolutely.
no problem.
Sorry to interrupt.
Then we have a 2/1 basket weave, red, maroon, or dyed cotton, and we think the outside of this was red or maroon colored, the outside of the shoe. That's interesting.
Absolutely.
A woven cotton cloth, which was then woven in a double warp twill, and the weavers out there will know what we're talking about. And compressed cotton fibers vulcanized, embedded in a layer, black rubber material containing clay and carbonite filler, which is very similar to the foam we use in shoes now, those with inserts. And then we have a little woven cotton cloth on top. And then we found 2 remnants of straps. And the straps had some nylon thread in them. And then they were pretty much cotton, but they're on that page 110, I think that's what you have there. And we show how they could have been made. Then we have a drawing of what the thing may have looked like, and it kind of looks like a child's
Sandal.
slipper.
Oh, a slipper?
Yeah, kind of like a slipper. Now, we don't know that it wasn't the bottom of a garment, like a children's pajamas, but it was the most interesting thing I think we found at the site was this shoe sole. And it has a lot of implications, too, you know, little shoe soles, and but we can't find any size that it fits. Now, you can measure a length in our shoes. We have over 300 sizes of shoes in the world, different sizes. And this one fits absolutely none of them because it's too narrow.
Well, let's go back to the materials. What extraterrestrial materials are in there that aren't of our system?
Well, nothing. Now, absolutely nothing. We know of all these materials. I talked to a guy at Nike a few years ago. He said, we know of these materials, but he said we couldn't afford to put them in a shoe and sell it. And he said, shoes of that size are for children that wear them out in a couple of months.
Has it been carbon dated? Do we know how old it is?
Well, carbon dating, Cosmo, is at plus or minus 250 years. And if any of your listeners want to finance carbon dating on this, I'll be glad to cooperate.
Understand.
I don't think this shoe is going to be over 250 years old.
Right. So basically what you've got to work with is the structure of it and who it would possibly fit.
Essentially, we've worked it down to size, and we've showed it to shoe people and went to different shoe companies, and they just say, well, we don't have anything like it. But this guy at Nike told me, he said, we know about these materials, and we've used them now and then in the past. We don't never seen them all in one shoe. And then he went on to tell me we couldn't afford to make a shoe like this and sell it if the kid's going to outwear it. And but I don't think this is made for a child. I think it's made for a small adult with 4 toes. That's my own opinion.
Sure.
And that pretty well rules out children.
Yeah, absolutely. Or 6 feet, as we've seen in the alien autopsy. Or six toes, as we've seen in the alien autopsy.
Barney Barnett said that they had, now he didn't describe feet, but he said they only had 4 fingers.
Oh, okay.
And that would be 4 digits, three fingers and a lower thumb digit. And so that was one of the things he described when he saw the bodies. And we talked about it might be connected with the Roswell crash. And the Roswell craft, I believe, was about 30 feet in diameter, and so was this one. And that'd be too small a craft to have 8 people in it.
Oh,
I think
see.
they found 4 bodies over there at Roswell, and Barnett saw 4 here. 1 or 2 was in the craft, and 1 or 2 were out on the ground. And he didn't mention any of them being alive.
And Barnett did describe the craft?
Yes, he described the craft and the bodies. They were wearing kind of a silver jumpsuit. And we found gray material out there last time we were there. In one of the excavations, we found some gray material, and we're getting it analyzed right now, and I haven't got them back yet. But
Right.
it could be from that jumpsuit thing.
Wow.
But I think when the thing landed,
So
it
this
already
investigation,
had been damaged.
right? And this investigation just hasn't stopped for you. It just keeps going off in different directions on you, huh?
Well, it's pretty well stopped now because of the financial reasons.
Sure.
I can't continue to go on much longer, and that's why we stopped and decided we better write the book now and get it out to the readers and listeners than to wait till the last bit of everything comes in, because it's continuing.
Well, how can somebody contact Art Campbell?
Yeah, I have an email. They want to contact me. It's just fine.
Let's do that.
Yeah. I'd like to put them somewhere in there when the topic and so forth mention UFOs. That we get a lot of spam, but I hope there isn't funny names like Clem Cadiddlehopper or something like that, because my wife will zap them right away as spam. But
sure.
if it's a serious person, they can get a hold of me at it's lowercase MLART at Conpoint, and that's a 2 N's, CONNPOINT .net. Okay, it's MLART at conpoint.net. Love to hear from your listeners.
And that's CONNPOINT.net.
Yeah, one word, Conpoint.
Very good, Art.
2 N's, yeah.
Very good. We got 10 minutes left. What would you like to tell our listeners? And ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to thank our new listeners and all you old-timers that have been listening to Cosmic Connection for, it's been years and years and years. We have a new time. We come on at 7 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Today, we are live. I'm in studio every Sunday now. Today's July 10th, 2005. My first guest is Mr. Art Campbell. He was on for part one last week. We're continuing and concluding our second part of our two-part interview. Today, we've got about 10 minutes left. And Art, how would you like to wrap up the show here?
Well, we mentioned some names, early people, and let me give you a little brief rundown of some of the early people in UFOs.
Love to hear them.
We talked about George Adamski earlier. Another guy that came out about 1954 was named Truman Bethram. And he was working laying asphalt somewhere in the Mojave Desert and was living in a trailer at night. And he said he was awakened by 5 or 6 aliens, olive skin, dressed in uniform. And he went outside the trailer, and there was a UFO about 300 foot wide and 18 foot high.
Wow.
And he went into the craft, and it was introduced to a female captain. And Bethram said the aliens liked dancing the polka. Of course, all of these stories seem to have a little bit of a flavor back to the person themselves. And Bethram apparently had been of German ancestry, but I won't say any more about that.
All right. But what?
Can you imagine these aliens in that 300-foot craft doing the polka?
Well, no, but what I can imagine is we've got Villas Boas, and I believe he was abducted in, 1952. He was one of the first abductees. He later became a doctor, a very well-respected individual. He was abducted by a beautiful humanoid alien E.T., he described it. Was forced to have relations with this entity.
Yeah, I bet that was hard to do.
Well, he stuck to his story for as long as I can recall. It's never been discounted. And he was a young guy at the time on a tractor plowing a field, and this happened to him. And then, we hear these stories that have come. We've also heard the Billy Myers of these humanoid, beautiful people.
I don't. The early. Billy Myers is the last one to talk about those beautiful people. I didn't put a lot of stock in the contactees early on. I did go to the Giant Rock Convention out there in '58, and I met a lot of people there that said, I'm not sure that the next superintendent of schools that is going to hire me wants me. No, I've been around these people. So I kind of got out of the thing for about 25 or 30 years. I got back in when I retired in 1989. Hey, there was another guy I want to tell you about.
Please do. We have
Fry.
5. Sure, we've got 5 minutes left.
Okay, Fry wrote a book called The White Sands Incident. He was a technician working down at White Sands missile range, and he saw a saucer land and went out there to touch it, and he heard a voice that says, "Don't touch it, pal. It's still hot."
Whoa.
And so that means that the aliens were now talking with slang,
Okay.
and that they sure know English well.
See?
And they flew into New York and back in about a half an hour. And that was one of the early guys. And then this Buck Nelson fellow was a rural Missouri resident who said he was a farmer. When I visited there about 1958 or 9, all I could find was a lot of goats. But I don't know what he was raising, but there wasn't much more than goats. And he was a small, wiry man, white-haired, with a crew cut, and he wore overalls.
Yes.
He said a spaceman landed, and your listeners are going to get a kick out of this. Spaceman was wearing overalls, too.
All right.
And it's amazing how some of these contactees can put themselves in these places of these space people.
Yep.
Dancing the polka and overalls and everything.
No, I see the similarities with each individual and
Yeah,
their
each
personality,
individual,
how it's working out.
This Truman Betham guy said that he was out there pouring asphalt, and he thought they were blue collar, and the farmer guys think they were rural.
Yes.
And anyhow, he asked people to bring him radio parts, and he had a shed full of radio parts. He said they taught him how to make a radio to this is Buck Nelson, to talk with the aliens.
Yes.
And I saw a shed full of radio parts out there. He said, put them out there in the shed. I'll get to it someday. And interesting enough, Buck Nelson had a collection of hubcaps. And you know, some of them looked for the world like some of the UFO pictures he was trying to sell.
I have no doubt about that
Yeah.
whatsoever. It is amazing to hear your accounts of these people. These are not in books. When I read this thing and looked at it, you've got the Lonnie Zamora sighting, of which we got onto in the last, but we've got about 2 minutes to go down. Give me 50 seconds on Lonnie Zamora and why people should pick up this ebook and check it out just for that alone.
Well, Lonnie Zamora lived in Socorro, New Mexico, which was within a few blocks of where Barney Barnett was. And his sighting was outside of the city limits. He was a policeman in those days. And one of the best sightings, most credible sightings that anybody had up until 1964. And even the Air Force couldn't debunk it. And in the book, we have a picture of a guy with a Geiger counter, an Air Force uniform, run over the site, and even a mark in the ground where they had the pod had come down, the landing gear.
Well, sir, I want to thank you very much for your friendship and for supplying me with this fantastic interview. Two-parter. I've had great fun asking you questions and hearing your answers concerning the days of long ago. Sir, best of health to you. Happy birthday to you. And I want to thank you very much, sir, Mr. Art Campbell.
Yeah, all my best to your listeners.
Thank you, sir. And that's going to do it, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Cosmic Connection. I am your host, Cosmo. I want to let you know I'm working on an interview, something for you vets out there, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be going into the information gathering of UFOs during the Vietnam War conflict. I'm talking to some individuals right now. Some fascinating tales are going to be on future programs of the Cosmic Connection here at KPAH Radio, ParumPradio.com. Every Sunday, we're going to be live for you at 7 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Again, ladies and gentlemen, contact me. This is the Cosmic Connection. I want to thank you very much for tuning into my program. We're going to be out of here.
You've been listening to The Cosmic Connection with your host, Cosmo, live from KPAH, Pahrump, Nevada.